Hey everyone, Harris O'Malley from DrNerdLove.com, brought to you by my generous patrons at patreon.com/DrNerdLove. Today, I want to talk to you about the one thing you can do that will help ensure that you have strong, positive, and healthy relationships. And I don't just mean romantic relationships. This advice will help you strengthen all of your relationships, whether it's with lovers and partners, with friends and family, even your coworkers. But before we talk about that specifically, let me set a scene for you. Last week, which I realize is an eternity in internet time, especially when you're talking about viral videos, some friends of mine sent me this video from TikTok user BoyMom Ashley and wanted to know what I thought. Now, in this, a woman has decided that she is going to call the question on her relationship with her boyfriend and is demanding that either they get married literally right then or they're going to break up. Personally, my advice is to break up because honestly, this is emotionally manipulative. It is the worst possible way to go about trying to resolve somebody's issues with commitment, assuming that A, that's actually the problem, and B, that he wants to get married in the first place. Now, leaving aside that this particular stunt could actually get him fired from his job, and also allowing for the fact that this is almost certainly a setup for viral fame, this is a great, if extreme example of someone trying to pressure their partner into doing something they may or may not want to do. She is making a public spectacle out of her desire to get married in such a way that her boyfriend is going to feel pressured into giving in, whether he wants to get married or not. What she is doing is ultimately trying to force his hand. What he does next, and honestly, who knows, the video ends before we ever find out, will determine the nature of his relationship with her for the rest of the time that they're together. Now, like I said, this is an extreme example, but maybe you have experienced something similar. Somebody pushing you into agreeing to or tolerating or going along with something that you don't want to do, or that you aren't comfortable with, or that you may have a strong objection to. Maybe you have been in a toxic relationship with someone who was always manipulating you into ways of getting what they wanted, leaving you feeling like a doormat. Maybe you have friends who treat you badly or who pressure you into going along with jokes at your expense or doing things that make you uncomfortable or that go against your values. Or perhaps you've had family members who would leverage guilt or reciprocity to make you do whatever they want, even if it is a huge inconvenience to you or emotionally draining, or even damaging. Or maybe you were constantly being made to feel as though your interests, desires, and wants are unimportant or inconvenient, even when that desire is simply, don't treat me like. So let me give you a personal example from my life. Way back in college, I was in a relationship that was, quite frankly, incredibly toxic. One of the biggest conflicts that I had with my girlfriend at the time was that she didn't like my spending time with my friends instead of with her. As far as she was concerned, she should be my first, last, and only priority. Just as importantly, she thought that a lot of my hobbies and interests were stupid or juvenile, such as wanting to play in my friend's mage campaign. To her, it was immature and dumb, and she could not understand why anybody would want to spend an afternoon pretending to do something. And since she didn't understand or care for it, she saw no reason why I should waste my time on it. Now, I put up with this because, honestly, this was my first serious relationship. I had incredibly low self-esteem, and I thought this was going to be my only chance ever at being in a relationship. And so I went along with things, in no small part because she would regularly hold the status of our relationship hostage. If I didn't want to, say, go to the mall with her, then she would threaten to just find someone who would, with the implication that either this would lead to her cheating on me with that person or just straight breaking up with me. There was one weekend in particular where I had actually gotten permission to take part in my friend's game, which in and of itself was a huge, huge red flag. I blocked out the majority of the day for gaming with my friends, and if you've played most tabletop RPGs, then you know the average gaming session is usually hours long. Now, I had been with my friends for less than an hour, probably about 45 minutes or so, before she showed up, declared that there was some important thing that we had to do together, and I forget what, it's honestly not that important, and dragged me away from my friends and the game. And not only did I allow her to do this, I wasn't allowed to have the free time to join them again. I let her have her way in that moment, just like I had before and just like I did over and over again. It didn't matter what we were doing. It could be discussing what we wanted to watch on TV that night, what to rent from Blockbuster. Yes, I know, I'm old. Even simply having to spend literal hours on the phone with her over spring and summer break, even when I was exhausted and begging her to let me go to sleep. If she didn't get her way, things would escalate to a fight that would culminate in threats of ending the relationship. She was able to do all of this because I had poor boundaries. I didn't stand up for myself, and as a result, I may as well have just tattooed "welcome" on my back because I was being a doormat. Now, to give another example of someone trying to override somebody else's boundaries, a very good friend of mine was married to a man who was always pushing her to have threesomes with various female friends they knew. Whenever she would refuse or get upset that he kept bringing it up, even though she said no every single time, he would give her the silent treatment to punish her, becoming more and more passive-aggressive, demanding to know why she was always so inconsiderate of his needs. He would make life incredibly uncomfortable and inconvenient for her in order to push her into doing something that she did not want to do with anyone ever. But it's not just romantic or sexual partners who will push at your boundaries. Friends and family may do it too. You may have the person in your social circle who will run roughshod over other people to get their way, or use social pressure to get other people to go along, no matter how much it bothers them. Or you may have the friend who constantly teases you or busts your balls, especially around other people, and loves to embarrass you in public and in front of other people. And if you object, they pressure you into backing down. That pressure may include telling you not to be such a killjoy, not to be such a little bitch or a wuss because you told them to knock it off. They may say that you're the only person who has a problem with it, that everybody else is okay with it, whatever it may be, and that you're being unreasonable or that you're taking things too seriously. And it's all in fun, and they don't see why you're making such a big deal out of it. In fact, a lot of folks will tell you that you're being unreasonable. Or you might have the coworker who keeps dumping responsibilities in your lap, things that are not actually part of your job. Or they may insist of doing things for you that you don't want, and then insisting that you owe them because they did this or that or the other thing, even though you never asked them to, and you may not even have wanted it in the first place. These are all people who are looking to trade on your having weak boundaries. They rely on your being willing to give in rather than to make trouble or to stand up for yourself. Predators and abusers especially rely on your having low or weak boundaries. People who hold and maintain strong boundaries rarely fall for their manipulation or give in to their pressure. But part of what can be so insidious is how often toxic, abusive, or predatory people, or even just people who want to run roughshod over you, will make your having boundaries at all seem unreasonable or even try to use them against you. The HBO documentary series The Vow illustrates one of the ways that abusers and predators will try to use your boundaries against you through what's often known as frame control. One of the things that was revealed by Sarah Edmondson when she left the cult NXIVM was the way that the subgroup DOS would coerce women into what was ultimately sexual slavery by convincing them to give over embarrassing or degrading material. Now, they framed it first in terms of accountability, encouraging people to keep their promises, and then in terms of being ethical, in terms of trust and being honorable. Women were expected to provide something deeply personal and potentially damaging if it got out as a way of being held accountable to keep their word and to do what their master said. Something that other, more reasonable people would call blackmail. But the way that it was framed was that if you were honorable and trustworthy, then you shouldn't have any hesitation to give them that collateral. After all, if you were honorable and could be relied on to keep your promise, then the issue of the collateral would never come up and it would never be released. So really, where's the risk? You should be ready to prove just how honorable and stalwart you are by providing this incredibly damaging or embarrassing collateral. The sneaky thing about this trick is that the way that it's framed means that if you start arguing about the terms, why it is or isn't necessary to provide that blackmail material, or what counts or would be acceptable, then you have already passively accepted the framing that somebody who's honorable wouldn't worry about these things. Moreover, you've agreed that they get to decide who's honorable and what makes someone trustworthy, and that by not going along with it, you're agreeing that you aren't. And since very few people want to believe that they're not honorable or can't be trusted to keep their word, there's more pressure to give in. But boundary violations don't just look like someone trying to coerce or compel you into doing something reprehensible or something that you can't stand or tolerate. Sometimes it can look like someone wanting to do something they like, possibly even for you, even though they know that it bothers or upsets you. So a family member, for example, who signs you up for a program or a class, even though you never asked them to, is pushing at your boundaries, especially when they expect you to be grateful or to do something for them in return. A romantic partner who keeps making little comments about something they want, deeper commitment, plans for the future, kids, sexual experiences, what have you, even though you have said you do not want these things, is pushing at your boundaries. They may not be consciously aware of it, but constantly making those comments are a way of pushing you to give them what they want. By bringing it up in little ways that may not seem important at the time, even though you have already said you don't like it, it becomes harder to object without looking like you're overreacting. Alternately, they may bring up a subject that you find uncomfortable or don't want to discuss with the rationale that, well, I have to bring this up because I feel that it's important for you to know X. As one example, I've had multiple coaching clients in open relationships who preferred not to get the details about who their partner was seeing or dating besides them, but whose partners would just casually bring it up anyway, or who would go out of their way to bait them into asking so that it would just happen to come up. I've had other clients who weren't interested in marriage or having children, but whose partner would casually make references to when we get engaged or what their future kids might be like in front of other people in public social gatherings, forcing my clients to just clam up and not say anything rather than risk making a scene right then and there. And of course, they're the folks who will do things that upset you or hurt you or make you uncomfortable because it's for your own good. They will tell you that they have to ignore your boundaries because it's important, or because they need to and they feel that their needs or desires override yours. And of course, there is the ever popular appeal to the nature of your relationship. If you were really my friend, you would do this. Or real friends, real boyfriends, real girlfriends do this. So how do you face these challenges and establish strong boundaries? First, you have to remember that boundaries are personal, individual, and granular. The fact that you let one person do X, or this particular person can do or talk about Y with you, doesn't mean that everyone gets to do so. Your relationship with each individual person is going to vary, which means that your boundaries with each person will also vary. For example, in your social circle, some people may have your permission to do things like hug or touch you without needing to ask first, playfully swat your butt, whatever, that other people don't. The fact that those people do have that permission, that they can do those things, doesn't mean that everybody gets to. This is because your boundaries are not a democracy. You are permitted to set your boundaries wherever you want, and other people don't get a vote. They do not get to decide for you that your boundaries are too much, that they're unreasonable, that they're too inconvenient, or that you shouldn't have that boundary with them. Now, they can think whatever they like about your boundaries. Everybody gets to have opinions. But you and you alone get to decide where you draw the line and with whom. What you should do is take time to think about what your boundaries are and where you set them. It is important to think about what you need, what you won't tolerate, or what you won't put up with. And this means being aware of your triggers, being aware of what does or does not work for you in your relationships, and understanding how to communicate those needs. You really, really want to put some thought into them and how these issues and having those boundaries make you feel. You want to make sure that your boundaries align with your needs and your core values. Because the last thing that you want is to try to establish boundaries and then immediately change them because you realize you may have set them in the wrong place. At best, this is going to confuse and frustrate people, especially people who genuinely like and respect you. At worst, it's going to signal to people that your boundaries aren't strong, that they're malleable, or that you probably won't enforce them. Speaking of which, let's actually talk about enforcing your boundaries. One of the worst things that you can do is have a boundary and then not enforce it. What this does is tell people that you will put up a token resistance before giving in. As far as they're concerned, this means they don't have to take you seriously when you do try to enforce a boundary, or that they can just push and push and push at you and you'll give in. That is why one of the most important things you can learn when it comes to boundaries and relationships is that no is a complete sentence. When you are defending your decision to push back against something, whether it is demands from your family or friends or someone treating you disrespectfully, there can often be a temptation to explain why. A lot of folks, especially ones who are people pleasers or who really feel rejection or ostracization, will often want to give reasons for their refusal. But here's the thing. The only reason you need is that you don't want to, that you don't like it, and you won't put up with it. If someone is demanding that you take on responsibilities that are not yours, you don't need to give an excuse as to why you can't. Just tell them that you won't. You do not need to explain why X is important to you or that you won't tolerate Y. As far as they're concerned, the important part is the boundary, not the reason. When you start to give reasons, especially reasons why you can't, then what you're telling people is that you feel the need to bolster your decision with evidence. That means that you are tacitly saying that you could be wrong or open to changing your mind. It gives an opening for people to argue against your boundaries or put you in the position of potentially having to accept that they're right, and now your stated reason for having that boundary is gone. People, especially manipulators and abusers, will pounce on that and use it against you. You do not need to say why you can't. You just need to say that you won't. When you start to give reasons or excuses, then you are no longer enforcing a boundary, you're opening negotiations. You're now giving them an opportunity to argue and logic you into agreeing with them even though you don't want to. And pivoting back to, well, I just don't want to, after you've started giving excuses that they have then demolished, means you're now coming to this from a weaker position. You have all but admitted that you are going to allow people to push you around. To give you an example, if we go back to the way that NXIVM compelled women to give collateral to their masters, any response other than, no, ends up tacitly acknowledging the way the other person set the frame. If you're coming up with reasons or excuses why you can't or won't, then you're working within the frame that they set and saying that you believe them to have the authority to decide who is or isn't honorable or trustworthy, and that makes it much easier for them to pressure you to give in. By refusing to even accept the frame in the first place, by saying, no, I don't think so, or no, I won't, you aren't making yourself vulnerable to pressure. You are refusing to let them set the terms of your interaction in a way that lets them define you. When someone is leveraging guilt against you, the same thing applies. Refuse to accept the validity of their argument or their framing. The fact that they did something doesn't automatically obligate you to do something in return. But it's not just cult members who will pull this sort of thing. Romantic partners, co-workers, even friends or family members may do the same thing. People who want to trade on your weak boundaries will create any number of situations in order to pressure you into giving in. They will appeal to your sense of fairness by insisting, well, they did this thing for you, so you owe them. In fact, a lot of folks with toxic or manipulative parents may recognize the "I did all of these things for you and you can't do this one thing for me" line of attack. Other times, they'll make you feel bad for refusing by telling you that you're being unreasonable and asking you to be a team player, or tell you that you're really the only person who has a problem with this, so you really should be letting it go. They'll tell you that other people were okay with this sort of thing, and so you should be, or that real friends would do this, or if you really loved them. Other times, they'll threaten you about how your refusal makes them sad or upset or otherwise causes them some form of emotional pain, and that is why you need to give in. Still others will push you to make decisions at a moment when you're not ready or not in the right headspace or haven't had enough time to decide. This could be anything from high-pressure sales pitches telling you that this offer is only good for this very moment, to someone demanding that you make an important and consequential decision about your relationship right then and there. Like, say, getting married.
If you don't marry me this second, I brought the pastor. I brought Emily. She's my bridesmaid. Hi, guys. I'm just finally making him commit, you know?
This is why it's important to get used to saying no. Not, I can't because, but just no. You don't need to rationalize it. You don't need to excuse it. You just need to be willing to say no and to stick to it to the point of absurdity if you need to. This doesn't mean that you necessarily need to be rude, or at least at first. You can couch it in terms like, thank you, but I don't want that. I appreciate the thought, but no. I'm sorry, but I can't. I love you, but I won't do that. If they're pressuring you to make a decision, you can say, I'm sorry, I never make decisions like this without at least sleeping on it first. Or, this is such an important decision that I'm gonna need to take time to think about it. In relationships, if someone is pressuring you to decide right then and there, especially about something major like, again, getting married, then tell them, I don't appreciate being pushed into making a decision like this on the spur of the moment. And if it is that important to you, then you shouldn't want me to rush into it. Or, I don't appreciate being given ultimatums. If you want me to make a decision that I would feel good about, then you won't push me like this. But if you keep pushing, then the answer is definitely no. The important thing to keep in mind is that what's important is your no, not the reason behind it. If they tell you that other people don't mind whatever it is that they do, the answer is, that's good for them, I don't appreciate it, now knock it off. If they tell you that real friends do X, you can tell them, real friends respect my no. What, are you not gonna be a team player? Not when the team refused to listen when I say no. You'd do this if you loved them? I love you, but I said no. Why are you being so stubborn? Because I said no. You're being unreasonable. Maybe I am. The answer is still no. This is for your own good. I don't care. I said stop. I'm trying to do this thing because I feel like it's important. Well, I told you it upsets me, and I asked you to stop. It is important to realize enforcing your boundaries can and does come with consequences. This means you could very well lose friends, have partners break up with you, or you could fall out with family members. You could even potentially lose your job. But part of having and enforcing boundaries means that you accept these potential consequences as part of having them. If you only have boundaries when things are easy, then you don't really have boundaries. But here's the thing. The fact that there will be consequences doesn't necessarily mean that the consequences are ultimately bad. Friends or lovers ditch you because you refuse to let them walk all over you? Good. Those are people you don't want in your life. Similarly, family does not get to treat you like just because you share blood. And there are ways of mitigating those risks so they aren't so scary, and so that enforcing your boundaries is easier. Diversifying your social circle and finding more and better friends. Working on your social skills. Taking that level in sexy badass so that you don't stay in toxic relationships for fear of being single. Looking for ways of diversifying your income, putting out feelers for other work. These all help make enforcing your boundaries less terrifying and much easier to accomplish. But having boundaries and communicating them clearly means that you will have stronger, healthier relationships. Letting people know what you want, what you need, what you don't want, and what you won't put up with makes for better, healthier, and less stressful relationships. It makes you a stronger, more confident person. All things that make it much, much easier to find the relationships that are right for you instead of accepting the ones that aren't. And the most important thing to remember is that having strong boundaries keeps toxic, predatory, and abusive people out of your life in the first place. They are looking for people that they can manipulate. If you don't give them the chance, they're gonna move on. Having and enforcing your boundaries can be scary. It can be incredibly intimidating. It can be hard to do so. Standing up to strangers or coworkers is one thing. Standing up to friends, family members, and lovers is so much harder. But by doing so, you are taking responsibility for your life and refusing to let others make you take responsibility for theirs. The wrong people will leave. But by having those strong, clear boundaries, you will be making sure that the people who are in your life are the right ones for you. That's gonna do it for this episode. Thank you so much for being part of it. So, you've heard from me, and now I wanna hear from you. How have you learned to stand up for yourself? What are the ways that you have learned to enforce your boundaries, and how has that helped you in your life? Share your story in the comments below. I can't wait to read them, and I know my viewers can't wait to read them either. Meanwhile, if you're ready to build up those social skills so that you can find your perfect partner, then you need to check out my book, New Game Plus, The Geek's Guide to Love, Sex, and Dating. This is the instruction manual you have always wanted, the A to Z guide for learning how to take that level in sexy badass, unleash your inner Casanova, and find the relationship that you have always wanted, whether it is for a lifetime or just that night. Links to buy it are in the show notes, so go check it out. And if you do check it out, or any of my other books for that matter, please do me a huge, huge favor and be sure to rate and review them on Amazon and Goodreads. It is a giant help to me. If you're digging the series, you know what to do. This is not your first time on YouTube. Hit the thumbs up, share it around with your friends, post about it on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, like, share, subscribe, ring the bell. You know how all this works. But if you are really enjoying these videos, if you feel like you're getting a lot out of it, you're finding that it's helping you, and you want to support the channel and in the process, help fund some awesome new projects, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/DrNerdLove. Even $1 is a huge help to me. It covers hosting, equipment costs, and it's like I always say, I can't do this without the help of patrons like you. So whether you are a brand new patron or you've been with me from the beginning, thank you so very much. Meanwhile, follow me on Twitter at DrNerdLove. Join the private Facebook group NerdLove Academy at facebook.com/groups/DrNerdLove. And as always, hit the logo to subscribe, check out my other videos, and I will see you here next time with more about love, sex, and dating. Thanks for watching.